So hi, Joe Iconis. Thank you so much for joining me today. Oh, I'd lost you.
Oh
There you are.
no. Oh
There
my
you are.
God, I'm so sorry.
So thank you so much for joining me. I'm a huge fan of yours, and this is the first time we're officially meeting. We've sort of virtually met through the article that I
Hmm.
wrote for American Theater Magazine. But thank you so much. How are you doing? What's going on? What's new?
I'm doing well. I'm in Manhattan right
Mhm.
now. I'm in a rehearsal studio, and yeah, I have a show that's running on Long Island. That I have an album coming out soon, and so things are good, if a little crazy,
Yeah.
because of the times we're living in.
How has that all been coming out of the pandemic and still dealing with the pandemic with all of your projects?
It's been okay. I consider myself very lucky because I have had things that I'm
Mhm.
working on. I've had things that are active that are kind of out in the world. But still, it's really just a pain in the ass. Like there's nothing fun about it. There's nothing good about it. I'm just so over all of it. And so I feel like myself and the people I work with are just like doing whatever we can to, get to the next day. But I'll be really excited once we're past this.
I mean, the nice thing about being a writer is it's kind of one of the only theatrical professions that you can do on your own in your house, that you don't have to have other people there to physically do it. But there sort of comes a point in the development process where that you can't really do that much anymore. I mean, I know for me, I had a show that was supposed to open off Broadway fall of 2020, and I've just been in a holding pattern with that for the entire pandemic and just waiting to for things to move forward and whatnot. So
Yeah, yeah, it's such a killer, and what's so annoying about it is that it's writing musical theater is hard enough anyway. Like it's what we do, and sort of in this and being in musical theater, it's like it's a challenging life, under the best of circumstances, and then this monkey wrench thrown into it is just it's really a lot. But yeah, we're getting through. We're getting through. I
yeah.
see the light.
So most people at this particular moment in time probably know you best for Be More Chill. But you've
Mhm.
been doing this very successfully for a while, and you graduated from NYU for your undergrad and your master's, right?
I did.
Yeah. What did you, how, tell me a little bit about your history and your story. How did you get into doing this? Where did you grow up? How did you end up at NYU?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up on Long Island
Mhm.
in Nassau County. Garden City is the name of the town I grew up in. Very sort of traditional middle class suburbia kind of vibe. I have a big, big Italian family. No one is in the arts at all, at all, at all. No one is in entertainment. I was definitely like the weirdo in my
Mhm.
family. I saw the original production of Little Shop of Horrors on September 27th, 1987, for my
Wow.
sixth birthday, and it immediately infused me with the love of musical theater. And I'd sort of been like, I've been kind of like unaware, but I've been the universe had sort of I think been prepping me to love musical theater because I really loved the Muppets when I was a little kid, and I love the movie Muppets Take Manhattan, which is all about the Muppets, making a Broadway musical. And I sort of had I was obsessed with Michael Jackson and Thriller, and like there were these sort of musical theater things that were floating around me. But Little Shop was really the first time I sat in the theater and watched a story play out with music,
Mhm.
and it honestly just it changed my it's more extreme than changing my life. It formed me as a being,
Yeah.
and it wasn't. And I loved Little Shop, but it wasn't the actual show itself, which
Mhm.
I loved it and still do. But it was like the art form of musical theater that I immediately was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my whole life.
Yeah.
And so then the older I got, I just became obsessed with musicals and with theater in general, and I was always like the only kid who ever took out like the biography of Stephen Sondheim from the local library, and like I just I read all I could and learned all I could about musicals. And when I was really small, I was in shows because that's the only way that you can participate if you're like a kid of a certain age.
I still
And
wish that there were some programs for young people and children where they could do directing and writing and tech theater and stuff because so many people that I know grew up thinking they wanted to be performers. And then when they got to college, discovered they actually had a passion for something totally different in the theater. And it's because they'd never had an opportunity to explore anything besides performing.
Well, yeah, and of course,
Yeah.
because why would anyone, unless you happen to be like born into a family that's a theater family, how would any person know that, oh yeah, there's all of these other things that you can
Right.
do in the theater?
Yeah.
And so, because and for me, even though, like I said, my family wasn't in the arts or anything, I was so lucky because I had a family that was so supportive of me. And even though they didn't fully understand what I wanted to do, they were totally behind me. And so I was able to like figure out, oh, there are people who write these things and know that's what I want to do. And yeah, and so I so that was all kind of happening with me as I was a young person, sort of careening towards middle school. And the other thing that was happening with me was that I was taking piano lessons from a neighborhood piano teacher, Mrs. Jablonski. I really hated it. I was not good at piano. I was not a good practicer. But the more I got into theater, the more I started sort of like going home and playing tunes by ear. And the more I started making up songs and everything. And so then I became this like little kid who was a really amazing piano player, basically just sort of playing by ear and improvising and doing that whole thing. And so then that's when I started like writing music, and I realized, oh, I wanted to write scores for musicals. And that's what I wanted to do from the time I was very young. And I went to NYU, Steinhardt, the music composition department. And that was the first time I ever had any kind of like proper, training or any kind of proper, music writing guidance. And yeah, and then I went on to the NYU Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, which is an amazing program that many cool people have come out of, and many cool people are professors there, like Michael John LaChiusa and Sybil Pearson and Bill Finn. And so I got to, create musical theater for real for the first time amongst all of these really incredible artists who I'd idolized my whole life.
I went to NYU too. I went to the undergraduate drama department, but
Oh, cool.
I got permission to audit classes in the grad musical theater writing program. So I was this little undergrad that would kind of not sneak in. I had permission, but would kind of sneak in and sit and watch all of the classes. What did you think of the training that you got at NYU in both of the programs?
So my undergrad, the training was great. It just wasn't totally what I wanted to do. So the training that I received as an undergrad, and the program has changed quite a bit since I went there, it was very geared towards classical composition. And it was like basically everyone who was there wanted to write classical music. And then there was like a few people who wanted to write film scores. And I was the only person who was like, I'm here literally to like learn how to write, the next like Little Shop or something. Like I was the only one who's like, musical theater is what I want to do. And it was so funny because like some of the professors, some of like the big professors there, they would just sort of like combine musical theater and film score when talking about it. Like they would act like it was the same thing. And I would always be like, it's like, I think it's very different, everyone, but they would just like talk about it like it's the same idea. And so the place that I really learned how to write musical theater as an undergrad was in my private composition lessons with this awesome teacher, awesome writer named Steve Rosenhaus, who's still there. And he just taught me like the basics of, oh, this is what a chorus does. This is what a bridge does. This, those kind of, the cornerstones of musical theater writing, but just good songwriting. And so, I feel like I kind of, I was sort of looking for my voice as a writer all throughout undergrad. And also, I was really not someone who was like anywhere near fully formed as a person in undergrad. Like when people talk about their undergrad college experiences and like going to parties and having, groups of friends and having all these transformative experiences, I just so did not have that. Like that was so not me. I felt very lost. I was like very shy. I did not feel confident in my body, in my mind, any of that shit. And so it wasn't until grad school that I had like a sort of big physical transformation. I had a big sort of mental shift about how I sort of moved about the world. And I kind of found my voice as a writer. I found like, oh, this is the sort of stuff that I want to write. And this is the sort of way that I want to write. And the crazy thing is that when I went into NYU, I was really musically driven. Like it was really all about the music. And I had written lyrics in high school a little bit, but it was just to serve the music. And I kind of always assumed that one day I would kind of find a lyricist, you know, I'd partner with and would be, you know, half of a lyric writing team, half of a music bit writing team. And I started writing lyrics in undergrad out of necessity.
Right.
And then by the time I got to grad school, the lyrics were just as important as the music to me. And now that's very much the case. And it's really hard for me to separate the two.
Were they supportive of you doing that? Because I know sometimes they put a big emphasis on like, no, you need to sort of specialize and collaborate with that.
Yeah, you know, when I went to the program, you could be accepted as either a words person or a music person.
Right.
But they made a few exceptions and let some people do both. And so I was very lucky in that I was allowed to do both. And so for anyone who doesn't know the program, it's a really incredible program. It's just amazing. And you're just writing new things each week, and you're working with different collaborators each week. And it taught me how to collaborate. It taught me so much. But when I went there, I would bounce back and forth between writing lyrics and music each week. And then I took all of the courses that the lyricists take and all the courses that the composers take. Since then, I believe now you have to only do one or the other. And honestly, I feel like if I would have had to make that choice, I don't know if I would have gone through that program at the time. So I'm eternally grateful that I was able to do both.
I think that when somebody's called to do more than one thing, it can be really phenomenal and great things come of it. I mean, certainly there are negative examples of that, but I don't know. I don't totally agree with the mentality at large of you have to specialize only in one thing. Because like you, there have been so many great people who have done more than one very successfully. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know the reasons why. And in an educational setting, I'm sure that people who know a lot more about it than myself could explain to me the reasons why it is perhaps beneficial to receive a proper education in just one. You know, when in my program, or my year rather, Michael R. Jackson, he was in my class. And I believe wasn't accepted as a music person, only a words person, but he wrote music because that was the thing. Like you could still, you know, just because you're accepted as one, not the other, you could still do both. You're just not, you know, receiving the sort of formal training. But Michael, I mean, you know, he wrote music and it was amazing. And like many of the songs he wrote then are in A Strange Loop. And so it's one of those things where it's hard. But also it's hard because it's like, I feel like, yeah, there's some people who probably should only write one, but how do you say that? You know, it's like, how do you, I don't know.
So how did you make the jump from graduating to working in the professional world?
Yeah, so my story is I had this musical that was my thesis musical called The Black Suits, which was the first full-length musical I ever wrote. And at the time, it was really, really different from anything else that was out in the world. So this was 2005, I graduated. And so this was like a year and change before Spring Awakening was out. And so there just wasn't musicals about young people. There weren't musicals that were about you know, the sort of like trials and tribulations of youth. And there certainly weren't very many musicals that had a score that felt youthful and contemporary and edgy and all that. And so this musical was that. And I got a lot of attention while I was still in school, like much to the eternal chagrin of my classmates. And so I graduated with the unbelievable circumstance of having this show in development at a very fancy nonprofit off-Broadway theater. Awesome. And so I had all of these people kind of swirling around me, and I got an agent because of that, and you know, all of these things that people, you know, spend their whole lives trying to get, I sort of had before I was released out into the world. And it was great in some ways, and it was like you know, very, very awful in most other ways.
Was that from these people coming to see workshops? Was it from teachers introducing them? Was it from you hustling and getting your work out? How did those connections get made while you were still a student?
Yeah, it was like I wouldn't call it hustling, because I wasn't aware of how to do that yet, although like I soon learned. But the thing that I had in school was I would play my songs for anyone who would listen. I would play them for them. And at the time, it was unbelievable, because I sort of, like I said, when I was sitting in a room, playing my songs for like Broadway producers who were coming in to do, adjunct faculty lessons, or whatever, a year before, I would have been like petrified to even say hello to these people. I would have been truly mortified to say, hi, my name is Joe, I'm a writer, to any of these people that I was like doing full performances, of my songs at the piano for. But, and so it was people who had sort of come through the program. It was like songwriter nights, just stuff where like people's work was put out there. People, the few people who encountered my work all kind of immediately honed in on it, because it was so different from everything else that was out there. And, in retrospect, I understand why that happened. And it was just like, during that time, during school, very few professional people heard my work, but the ones who did all were like, I want that, which again, makes sense. It ended up being like really rough for me, because the production never happened, and it was in development for years and kind of fell apart. And then Spring Awakening came out, and then all of a sudden there was a million shows like my show, and then it was like my show's time was kind of done, and it was such a weird thing, because at the time too, like I had Black Suits, and then Lin-Manuel had In the Heights, and we were always like sort of talked about together. And it was like, Black Suits was like me, like the story of like, kids on Long Island, where I'm from. And In the Heights was the story about like, kids in the Heights, where he was from. And so it was really like, that was the kind of vibe back then. Which is just to say that show and that production fell apart in like an unbelievable blaze of glory that perhaps one day I'll write a book. As that development was happening, and as it was becoming clear to me that show was not going to get produced, or not going to get produced on the timeline that I assumed and hoped, I was like, I want to do shows. I want to have my work on stages. And I was writing all of these standalone songs that were theater songs, but were, sort of pop influenced and contemporary. I was like, I'm writing all this material. I want to just like do it for people. And people produce shows and they do them on stages. So why can't I? And so I figured out how to do, sort of the first thing was this show called Things to Ruin, which turned into Things to Ruin, which is an album, and it's a licensable sort of song cycle. When it first started, it was very much just kind of, it was a less kind of strung together, more sort of theatricalized concert. But I partnered with a theater company, and we just like put it on ourselves at Ars Nova. And that kind of took off. And then the more people heard my work, the more interest people had in my work. And then I started doing these concerts that now are called the Iconis and Family Concerts. Initially, they were called the Rock and Roll Jamboree. And that all came out of me just having material and wanting to get it in front of people, and wanting to get it in front of people in a way that felt theatrical and fun. And again, like different from the things that were out there at the time. At the time, there wasn't, and this is like, 2006, 7, 8, there was not a musical theater concert scene in the way that there is now. And so the musical theater concerts that I was going to see, which I loved, all felt very recital-like to me. They all felt like, or it was like, there was like one of two, like some of them felt like, recitals where it was like people behind music stands, and they would, it felt like overly sober events. And then it was like what I would describe as dad rock, which was like, like sort of like older musical theater composers who were like trying really hard to be cool, but just felt very uncool to me. And so I was like, I want to do something that has the like energy of of a rock concert that has the energy of a you know, a real people music concert, but is unabashedly theatrical and has the sort of like spirit and, you know, melody and stories and characters of like an old time sort of like show tuney cabaret. And so that's how the idea was kind of born.
I think it's
yeah, and that's really how. And yeah, no, you go.
No, go ahead.
No, so I was going to say that me doing, you know, concerts and shows and all that, that is how I entered into the business. You know, I really thought it was going to be through the sort of conventional way of, oh, I wrote this musical and it's going to open off Broadway and it'll, you know, hopefully get a great New York Times review and then go to Broadway and then it will, you know, win like a couple Tony Awards and then I'll be like off my path. That was the sort of dream. And as someone who had studied musical theater since he was 7 years old, like I knew how, you know, shows like those sort of shows that I wanted to write, I knew how those shows, you know, needed to be received. I knew the path that they had to like go down in order for the shows and their writers to hit that next level of success. And so when it became clear that wasn't going to happen for me for you know, some time, if ever, I you know, started doing these concerts, and that's how anything that I've gotten in my career has come out of this work that I've kind of, you know, put on the stages without people asking me to.
Well, I think it's so smart, and I think that you really have been in the zeitgeist of how that has all changed and how development has changed. And I remember when I was really little and I got Audra McDonald's album where she had specifically done all songs from new and up and coming writers, which at the time were like LaCusa and Adam Gettle and whatnot. And I remember it being such a thing that she had insisted on working with writers that weren't as well known. And that's how I learned about all of these people. And that's what led me to discovering Floyd Collins and Spitfire Grill and Violet and all these other shows. My kitty wants to come and say hi.
Oh, cool.
She's a brat, but she's pretty. Hey, puppy.
Look at that beautiful cat.
She knows it too. And it was such this, just that album was such this sort of revolutionary thing in terms of how people were starting to discover shows. And then when I became familiar with what you were doing with concerts, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's such a genius. He's taking this idea and he's bringing it into the new technology and into everything else that's happening. And you did get a huge following, not just with the elites of the New York theater scene, but with teenagers that were discovering your songs and using them for auditions and things like that. And it always made me think of you as almost like the composer of the people in a way, that you just immediately got in and connected with the grassroots community that you were always meant to connect with and didn't necessarily need gatekeepers to make that connection for you, which I always just thought was so smart.
Thank you for saying that. It's, you know, and I wish that I could take credit for it being some like grand plan, but really it was the most you know, organic thing, because for me it really was as simple as like, I'm writing songs, I want people to hear those songs. Yeah. No one is giving me an opportunity to put them on a stage, so I have to like make it myself, you know. And so really it was that. But I think also it's like that, you know, that impulse to just like it's just like about making the art that you want to make. Everything that's like everything in art, I feel like that's a revolution. Everything that turns into, you know, a movement or whatever comes from that authentic place. You know, I feel like very rarely does some major shift happen because, you know, some like smart businessmen are like behind the scenes being like, how can we manipulate the public? You know, it's like, of course things like that happen. And of course there's, you know, many musicals and many pieces of art that are made that way. But the real ones that have a lasting impact and the real ones that change things, I feel like always come from people genuinely just wanting to like make something that they believe in.
Was there a backlash is the wrong word, but I can't think of a better one at the moment, but from the community when you started to do that? In that I remember when people first started putting things on YouTube and doing concerts and things, there was a lot of, oh, you shouldn't do that because people are going to steal your work and they're not going to credit you. And I mean, that's still a concern. It doesn't seem to be nearly as much of a concern as it was back in the day, but were there people that were criticizing what you were doing because of things like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, and the criticism about, you know, certainly the way that I did things, and have continued to do things are, you know, there's a whole bunch of them. The biggest one, you know, in talking about the gatekeeper thing, this is something that I didn't fully realize until Beamer Chill ended up on Broadway.
Yeah.
There is a palpable sense of anger at me and my show from a certain sort of type of person, a certain level of person in the New York theater community,
Yeah.
that made me feel like, oh, these people are angry at me. It's not just like, it's not
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, they're, you know, look at this like little engine that could, like, there's that thing where it's like, everyone's like, oh, it's the little show that could, because it really was. But it's like, oh wait, no, these people are actively furious at me that
Yeah.
I have got here without jumping through the hoops and without doing the things you are supposed to do, all the things that I have always thought I would one day do, but didn't happen for me. They're angry. And so that's the thing that I think I felt the most with some of that stuff. But, you know, for sure, the thing of like having your music out there on YouTube, and I am like the most old school, you know, composer writer of all time. Like I cannot even tell you, like if I could, I would write all of my music on an old, you know, acoustic upright piano and like record my demos on like reel-to-reel tape. Like I don't use any sort of computer software. I don't do anything that feels like of the moment or of the time. And I'm very much like, you know, oh, how you get a show on Broadway is like you invite a bunch of producers into a room, and you play your songs and you give them wine and cheese. And I like, that's like the world that I obsess over and have always sort of wanted to be a part of, which is just to say that when all of this started, when I started doing concerts and YouTube was new, everything in me was like, oh man, you can't do songs from a show before the original cast album comes out because you're going to spoil it. And it went against everything that felt correct to me. However, it was very apparent to me that whether I liked it or not, times were changing. And you just like, you got to go with the times, you know, and I felt like the way that I can participate in this is by staying true to who I am as an artist and staying true to the types of material that I want to write and the way I want to write it and how I want it to sound and the people I want to work with. And I can do that in the context of this new way that people consume media. And so I feel like, you know, right from the beginning, I was just like, put whatever the hell you want on YouTube, cameras, go crazy. Because also coming from like or being inspired by, you know, real people music, being inspired by, you know, rock shows and rock bands and everything like that. It's like they've been, you know, rock bands have been doing that forever. Like trading bootlegs of rock shows has always been such a thing. And it doesn't spoil the material for people. It only makes them love it more. And so I felt like if this is the way the world is going, I'm going to look at my stuff like that. And we're just going to let it all hang out. And that's what it's going to be. And early on in my career, I gave away my music for free all the time, which I think piss off a lot of people, but it was very clear to me that it's whether we like it or not, people were not going to be paying for things like music anymore very shortly. And so it felt like I would rather have people know my stuff and feel a connection to me and my material. And then hopefully they will continue to follow me and support me down the line. And it will, you know, if it's about money, it will pay off one day. But even if it doesn't, you know, it's just about putting the material out there and hopefully people will, you know, find it.
Well, and it's interesting. Amanda Palmer has a wonderful book called The Art of Asking, where she talks about something similar, about how she left her big label and was doing something similar and getting involved in sort of grassroots. And she was talking about how that exact sort of fear that you were describing, and it ended up being the opposite, where she would be at shows and somebody would like walk up to her signature table and like hand her a $20 bill and be like, I illegally downloaded your CD from a friend. I just wanted you to have this, you know, and things started, I don't know. It was like things about the balance of getting remuneration for your work started to balance out. But I'm also so interested in what you were talking about the powers that be that seem to really hate you. I did a voluntary senior thesis at NYU about the discrepancy between audience and industry response to Broadway musicals, specifically looking at the work of Stephen Schwartz. And I adore Stephen Schwartz. He's one of my favorite writers of all time. He's been a mentor of mine since I was in college. His shows have gotten good reviews. He personally never has. And they're some of the cruelest things I have ever read. Like, it's not even about the art. It's like a personal vendetta. And in doing all this work, I started to really realize that it's not just about the individual people. There seems to be something in our industry where from the beginning of musical theater, commercial stuff goes over here and sort of more intellectual, erudite stuff goes over here, and this is valid and this is not. And there seems to be this real hatred for people that just are commercial in the sense that they are connecting with an audience that seems to be separate from sort of the powers that be. And I just find it so, I mean, you know, but you're not alone. And I just find it so fascinating that that's something that seems to have been happening from the days when it was, vaudeville and ethnic theater versus opera and operetta. It just seems to be, I don't know. I find it a bit of a challenge in our industry, but yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting. And it's, the crazy thing too, is that it's so arbitrary because, I think it's really easy to look at something like King Kong and be like, that's a commercial musical that was made by a corporation and they hired people to write it, and they had the title King Kong and they wanted to put a lot of money into it to further the brand or whatever the hell is the reason why things start. And of course, people, amazing artists work on that and found their way in, but that's like you could look at it and like, that's a commercial show. That's not like a show that someone, had an idea for and like wrote in their, put on in the basement with their friends and whatever. Right. There's that, but then it's like, there are so many shows now that are like stop hits that are so commercial. And the actual writing is commercial and like, there's, of course, I'm not going to like name names. Cause again, that's like, I feel like for when I'm very old, but, there's like one show that came out a few years ago that's like major snob hit, earth shattering snob hit. And the writers of the show say that they were specifically writing to be commercial. They were specifically writing to be general and to have songs that could potentially be on the radio, whatever that means. And it's like that thing, it's just so funny to me that the disparity, I feel like, used to be more on the surface. It used to be more like, in the days of like, Sweeney Todd and the Wiz, it's like you could sort of, I mean, that's a bad example, but it used to be more like, oh, this is the snap hit and this is the commercial show. And now there's like this weird crossover, and it's fascinating to me and it's very strange.
Yeah. So what was it like now having an agent, and you had some success, and then you sort of felt like your career was a bit stalled? Did your agent do anything to help you? Were they just sort of like, I'm here to do the contract whenever that happens? Or did you have anybody that you felt in your orbit or your community that could really help you? Or did you feel like you were just sort of pounding the pavement on your own?
I felt, honestly, I felt kind of alone, and I had lots of people. I had lots of people who supported me, and I had lots of people who believed in me and told me that I was great and that good things would happen. And amazing people like Kurt Deutsch and Ghostlight and lots of folks like that who were really supportive of my work. But as far as like me getting the next thing, as far as me getting opportunities, at that first bit of my career, it really felt like it was on me to make it happen, and it's tricky. And I've had a few different agents throughout my life, and a couple of them have been really, really like stunningly great people. including like right now, I have this guy, Michael Finkel, my last guy, Scott Chaloff, like really, really awesome agents.
Mhm.
But there's only so much they're going to do
Right.
unless you're famous. Every time in my career when I have had my agent do the most for me in a sort of like black and white, oh, getting opportunities kind of way, has
Mhm.
been when everyone was talking about me. So it's like when I had the weeks that I had songs on Smash, and the weeks that Be More Chill was really successful off Broadway, and the weeks that Be
Yeah.
More Chill went to Broadway. And so I think that's just like what it is when you're a writer. I think
Yeah.
or that's what it is when I'm a writer. It's
No,
like
I feel
as
it.
far
I
as
feel it so much
getting the
because
next thing.
I think there's definitely a feeling that when you get to a certain level and you sort of have certain people in your corner, like it's kind of smooth sailing. And a lot of times it's like, no, you're still out there kind of hustling by yourself and hoping that something will happen. And I wish people talked about that more because it's very frustrating.
Me too. And I think that it's something that I struggle with, constantly is just I mean, it's like frustration, exhaustion, and
Mhm.
jealousy. And it's really hard to be like, oh man, I've worked so hard, and I feel like every opportunity I've gotten, I've had to like work like a dog and claw my way to
Mhm.
getting this opportunity,
Yeah.
and it's like, doesn't it count for something? Doesn't it add up?
Right.
Doesn't it? Don't I get some like some
Absolutely. Well, I
change in the
think one
bank?
thing it's linked to that I remember it being sort of this huge thing when I discovered it is when you get to a certain level, it's no longer about who's best at the thing. It's no longer about like, oh, whoever's the best composer is going to get the Broadway deal. It's like you get to a point, everyone's good and everybody has a unique voice, and that's great. And there's room for everybody. And it really comes down to the personal preference of the people who are in a position to say yes. Like you could, this is the most random thing, but like you could write the most incredible, moving, earth shattering musical about bees. And if that producer is like, I hate bees, like the show's never going to happen. And it has nothing to do with the quality of it. Um, which I think is why self-producing and creating your own work is so wonderful, but there's so much of a stress and pressure when it comes to that too. So it's, I don't know, these are things that I feel like nobody talks about, and we should, because it starts to
Yeah,
feel like a secret club. Like, am I the only one who realizes this frustration?
yeah. It's no, I
Yeah.
know, and I so appreciate anytime I see any artist who I admire or relate to talk about the actual like nitty gritty of it. Um, which is just it's not to say that it's bad, it's just the way that it is. I
Yeah.
will say though that just in case there's anyone listening or watching who's like a younger person who's listening to this and you're like, oh my god, why would I ever want to do this? It's the agent stuff, it's like it's all the agents are all helpful, but I in my career I feel like the most helped by people in the business, be they
Yes.
like sparkly people or just hardworking people or whatever, who believe in me, who have vouched for me or put me forward for things or called
Yeah.
me, or and so it's like there's so many ways to do the thing, and it's and I've been very lucky in that I've had a lot of people who have supported me, even if that doesn't mean
Yeah.
someone calling me and being like, oh, Disney wants you to write
Right.
Pocahontas too. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. The theater community really is a community, and it's so remarkable and special. And there have been people that have mentored me out of the goodness of their heart. There have been people who have helped me in
Mm-hmm.
various ways that had nothing to benefit by it, but just like somebody had helped them, so they wanted to pass it forward. So I think the community is really special, and that makes me think of your wonderful friendship with Jen Tepper, who I know as well. How did that start? How did your friendship with her start in your collaboration?
My friendship with Tepper started because she was just someone who like came to shows a lot. She came to my gigs at the Beachman Theater
Mhm.
on 42nd Street in the West Bank Cafe, and that was sort of like the first spot that Iconis and family like did runs of shows. That's where we kind of like learned how to do this. And she would just come all the time, and I met her through that, and I always thought she was super cool, super smart, and she I mean, it's kind of it's the ultimate, like the rest is history. I've met so many people through work, and whether that's like, actors or musicians or, people behind the scenes or in the audience. It is like, it's, uh, I'm so sorry. I was getting text, and it like literally made my brain go away.
Okay.
Technology is terrible.
I know. It's like all the notifications pop up no matter what you do.
It was literally something about assassins. Someone texted me about assassins. I have no idea about what. It was like a musical theater emergency. Need you to see this.
Oh my gosh, I want a TV show now called Musical Theater Emergency about like the equivalent of the Justice League, but for like musical theater people that just have to sit by.
Yeah, I'm living it, man. But so at any rate, I've met so many people through that, and so that's how it was with Pepper, and we just immediately connected. And she was, she's just a like-minded artist, a like-minded person, and before she was like producer Jen Tepper, she was producing my stuff. We were concocting shows and insane performance things and opportunities and videos, and and so she was one of the lead producers on Be More Chill on Broadway. And it's like, and by the time Be More Chill got to Broadway, we had been working together for 10 years up until that point, just making stuff on our own. And and she's just the absolute greatest. And sort of like me, she's someone who she's from Florida. And she didn't grow up with family who is in the business, and I think there's just something to that, just because there are so many great theater legacies. There's so many people in this business who sort of come from a long line of theater people, and there's so many people in this business, especially in New York, who are like, oh, their father was so and so, and they're and like everybody went to Yale, and it's sometimes as an outsider, it's a little bit hard sometimes to imagine yourself in that world, or you immediately start thinking like, oh, do I need to like have that? Should I have been born into a different family so that?
Oh no, I feel that, because there starts to be a point where like it's going to take me all this work just to get in the physical room that these people just have been walking in all their lives.
Yeah. And that's such a hard thing. It's so tricky. But so I think that Tepper sort of has that as well, that we came to this art form when we came to this world because we just love it so much, and she's just like the absolute greatest. And I feel so lucky that I have her as a collaborator. And also, the other thing too that I, especially in the last year and a half, for obvious reasons, I feel like there's been so much talk of producers, and people talk about producers like there are these, I feel like every time I hear a conversation about producers, producers equal greedy old white men who are probably abusive. And while there are plenty of greedy old white men who are probably abusive in the business, the reality is that like the word producer can mean so many different things, and they come in all shapes and sizes. And Jen Tepper, who's like, my favorite producer, is someone who is not, she's not wealthy. She doesn't have access to unlimited sources of money. Her producer skill set is about dramaturgy. It's about marketing. It's about, creating a family atmosphere. It's like, and so, it's just, and I love being able to work with her and other producers who I work with, who I love, who I consider friends, who I don't think of as like, greedy, evil, money grubbing bosses,
Yeah. So speaking of your collaboration, tell me a little bit about Be More Chill and what that whole experience was like for you. Because I would imagine it was a little bittersweet in that you got like your dream of having a show finally on Broadway after, many years where you deserved to, and just, struggling. And then it had this sort of mixed reaction, but this deep, deep love from so many people. What was that all like for you?
Yeah, the journey of it was so unexpected and so kind of, thrilling. Yeah. And also, as you said, impossibly hard. But like I said before, I really, truly, my whole life up until Be More Chill, had this idea of, for a show like the sort of shows that I want to write, to make it to Broadway, it had to check off all of these things. And you know, Be More Chill, when we had our premiere at Two River Theater in New Jersey in 2015, it you know, it immediately failed the number one thing, which is, for a little show, you need a great New York Times review in order to propel you forward. Unless
I'm shocked that that's still as much of a thing as it is, because it seems like it, yeah.
It just is. Like, it's unless you are like, unless you're based on a movie and you have a movie company either like outwardly producing or secretly producing, which they love to do now, or you have a famous person in it, or, you know, unless there's something else, then that's the exception. But for like a little show that is not made by famous people, that doesn't have a path already, it's just like, it's very black and white. I would actually love to see literal statistics about that, because I know what they would look like without actually doing it. It's like pretty right there. But so at any rate, and it's something, it's so hard to talk about because it's impossible to talk about it and not seem ungrateful or like sour grapes. But it's black and white, as you know. So my show opens, right? The New York Times decides to come. They don't have to come; they decide to come. And they decide to have, at the time, Charles Isherwood review it, right? And so Charles Isherwood reviews it and says it's a piece of shit. Totally fine. He didn't like it. Fine. Then immediately, any producer, any theater who has tickets booked to see it, they cancel. And it's just like, I've been through this so many times. That's just what happens. And I agree that it's like, how on earth are we still doing this? But like, we are, black and white.
Well, and honestly, just so you know, it doesn't seem like sour grapes or anything to me. I think I'm so grateful that you're talking about it. And I think it's so important, because the truth of the matter is, every single show that ever has been, there's a different story, but there are deeply rooted frustrations that make the thing a little bittersweet. I'm reading James Lapine's book on the creation of Sunday in the Park with George right now. And just the number of things about like actors quitting and sending like hate letters about James Lapine to Sondheim, and then like Mary Rogers trying to like undermine the whole, it's like, there's no such thing as like a smooth sailing thing. And I think it's important, especially for young artists, to realize like, oh, all these frustrations I have, they're never going away, and we should just embrace it because they're gonna be there. So,
yeah, it's all part of it. It's all very exciting.
And it sucks, but it's there. So
yeah. So at any rate, with Be More Chill, you know, so when we closed in New Jersey, I had no reason to believe we would ever do that show again. And I tried so hard for, you know, actively, probably for a year and a half, trying to get any producer interested, trying to get another regional production, trying to get anything with that show. And nobody wanted anything to do with it. It was like zero. I had zero interest for pushing. Jen Tepper did it as a concert, as part of a series of new musicals at 54 Below. From that, R&H came to see it, and they were like, oh, this is great, we should license this. So they licensed the show, and it sort of just was available for licensing when it kind of all exploded. And it exploded, you know, because of the cast album, literally 2 years later, 2 years after we closed.
Wow.
And that, you know, as I've talked about a lot, that the viral sort of, you know, success of the show is what, you know, allowed us to go to a couple producers, and truly only a handful. Like, you know, I had, you know, less than four, more than two meetings about doing a production of Be More Chill. And we did it, you know, at the Signature that summer, and the sort of mania surrounding that production. And, you know, the ticket sales was the thing that allowed us to go to Broadway. And I truly did not believe that we would get there. And, you know, once we were about to open at the Signature, when we opened at the Signature, I tried so hard to not think about what happens next, right? Because at that point, it had been like 8 years since I had any show in New York City at all. The last show before Be More Chill that I had in New York City was Blood Song of Love. And I kept being like, I just wanted to do a show in the place where I live, like that would be really cool. Off Broadway, anything. And so this was so exciting that this was happening in New York City. But, as soon as it started, everyone then was like, what do you think is happening next? What's happening next? Right. And I kept being like, I'm not going to think about it because I just want to enjoy these 10 weeks and be like, this is exciting that my show is in New York City. Yeah. And then, and it's just like, this is, I was talking about it. Then everyone is like, oh, if that Times review is good, this could go. And so then again, I was like, oh my God, how is this happening again? How is this like the thing that I'm having to deal with again with this show? But of course, I'm like, and so it felt like everyone was waiting for that review. And the review came out, and it was another terrible review, a brand new terrible review for my show, written by Brantley this time. And
had the show changed much between the two productions?
A ton. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, a ton in that, like, it changed in a way that like musical theater writers would be like, it changed so much. And like anyone else would, would probably be like, I think there were some differences.
It's not like it was suddenly set in the 1800s or something like.
Yeah, exactly. The show is the show. And, but it's, the production was different. It was different, but, different cat, like whatever. But, but we got that fucking review, and it was like, it truly felt like a funeral. And the opening night party for Off Broadway, it was like as bad as people coming up to me and literally saying, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
on the opening night. Truly. Like, didn't have to explain themselves. Like, it was so like, oh, what a bummer. And so that happened. And I was just like, this is it. I'm just, I guess, at the mercy of this paper that doesn't seem to like me very much. And the only person, literally the only person who did not do that to me on opening night was Jennifer Ashley Tepper. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, she said, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. We got this. We're just not doing this. Yeah. Meaning we're not doing the thing where like our show's going to close because of this review. Right. And I was like, okay, if you say so. And she was like, no, we're not doing this. Sorry, not going to happen. And I can't tell you like what it meant to me in that moment. And then, a month later or something, or I guess a few weeks later, when I found out that we were going to go to Broadway, it honestly felt like this is the thing that I needed. No matter what happens with the show, this is the thing that I needed to get me through the next probably 15 years of my life, because it honestly felt like a miracle, because every single thing that I thought I needed to do in order to get to that place with the show did not happen. And every step of the way, some sort of surprising out of the blue thing happened. Like the fact that so many people discovered the musical, which is all I ever want anyway, which is why I want to be on Broadway. I want like the maximum amount of human beings to experience these things that I write, because I'm writing them for people to experience them, to experience them. The fact that so many people found it for no reason, found it where there was no production running. They just found the music and fell in love with it. And that was the thing that got us on the stage in the first place. And then people's loving it was the thing that got us to the next stage, was just something that I truly never, ever in a million years thought could happen. And it did.
Well, and very well deserved. I'm so glad that happened. And I think it's the kind of story that we need in this industry, because it's also, that audiences have power and that they're important, and the things that matter and move us, like that's valuable. And we don't necessarily need somebody else to affirm that or not,
Yeah. And it's so weird, because it's like my own show, but it gives me hope, like the way it happened. Cause also it's one of those things where if it wasn't my show, I don't think I'd believe it. I think if it wasn't my show, I would look at it and be like, there's some company that we don't know about who had money in that show, and they were trying to get a tax write-off. I would make a million excuses for how it ended up on Broadway, but it's like, I was there. It didn't. It ended up there, like for real, like the way the story went, And I
saw it, and the crowds went crazy. I mean, it was like a rock concert. They loved it. And they loved it before they even walked in the door, which is amazing.
I know. And it's so strange that also is the thing that me and like people who have been, who have been following me or performing with me, you know, for years, or just people who like me, were so amazed by that. And so like, this is nuts that these like kids are singing, you know, they know show tunes before they're walking in the theater. And that thing of like, everyone who loved it before they walked in the door infuriated the other sort of people that we have been talking about. It infuriated them. And I mean, and you like see it, it's in all of the reviews of the show. The audience of my show was reviewed just as much as my show, which is a joke in a commercial theater space where half the things on the fucking stages are jukebox musicals, where people are, no one talks about no one talks about the bridge and tunnel crowd singing along to Jersey Boys, but it's like young kids loving new musical theater. Actual show tunes written for the show were like made fun of in the New York Times, which is mind-blowing to me.
But I think it's also so great that because of you and the way that you have had your material out there for your whole career, it offers a way for people to discover it. Because I mean, there's nothing worse than being a musical theater loving kid who is not New York adjacent. And you can't see, it's like, you can't just go see the show. You want to, but you know, it used to be that you would just cling to the Tony Awards and like that one number you would just like relive and forever. But now it's a way to make it accessible in a great way. Because the thing that makes Broadway so special and unique is you have to go there to experience it, you know, and not everybody is able to do that. So I don't see a drawback to people discovering things and loving them however they can.
Yeah, same.
So what do you think has continued your whole career to draw you to writing these kinds of stories about young people and teenagers and coming of age? Because you found this great niche that you have such a strong voice for and obviously such a passion for. What do you think has continued to bring you back to those kinds of stories?
Oh, you know, I think that I just really like writing young characters because I love the fact that young people in general they have not yet learned how to build the walls up that we just naturally sort of learn as adults and as older people. So I feel like there's an honesty and an openness there, and I feel like the vocabulary is just different. I like writing younger characters. I feel like sometimes it's like just writing in a foreign language. You know, they have the same, you know, the same thoughts and ideas or whatever as you know, as adults. They're just, you know, phrased in a different way, and the access to words isn't maybe always there. And so I just really, you know, respond to that. And I love writing characters who like aren't jaded, you know, and I love dealing in worlds that it's not about people being jaded. So I think that's it. But you know, I've also written so many shows and I've written so many songs, and I have like shows like Broadway Bounty Hunter, where the lead actor is a woman in her late 60s. And so I feel like as much as I write for young people, I kind of, you know, run the gamut. I think that people just kind of know my stuff for young people more than the other.
How for you does writing for something that you've created, you've had the initial spark and it's been your idea, differ from when you get commissions, like to write something for Smash, where it's, you know, you have some freedom, but it's like, we need a song that sort of fits in this slot and is about this thing. What was that like for you when you started doing that, and how has that differed?
Yeah, you know, I've been lucky in that pretty much all of the stuff I've written, whether it's a totally original idea or something that I've been, you know, kind of hired to write, it's all stuff that I feel completely sort of represented by. It all feels really personal to me. I'm not good when I'm like faking it, you know, like I'm not good if I can't find a way into the material. I'm not a writer who can just like, you know, whip out a song for some quick bucks. Like I have to really connect to the material in order to like make it happen, which is just to say that, you know, I've you know, the work for hire stuff, like anytime I've written like a spec song for a big movie that turned into a musical, I've only ever done that if I really felt like I could write this show and it would be something that would feel as personal and real and authentic to me as an idea that I came up with myself. And so, you know, even the Smash songs, like both of those tunes of mine that were on Smash, like I had written them previously. They were standalone songs that just ended up getting used on the show. Yeah. And I wrote a few others for that show that ended up not getting used. And I think that's just because there's just something, it's like you can just sniff it out. I feel like when I'm writing something and I'm not fully invested in it, or not even fully invested, when I'm writing something that I think is the sort of thing that other people want to hear, as opposed to me just writing for myself. It's just, it sounds like a fake version of myself, you know, or it's like that me doing that, there are a million other people who could do that thing so much better, which is why I feel like so many of like the songs that I've ever written that I don't feel totally connected to don't ever really see the light of day, because if someone's going to pay for them, they're like, I'm not paying for that. You know?
Yeah.
Give me one of the good ones. Yeah.
This is my favorite question to ask. What's a question you've always wanted to be asked in an interview that you never have? And how would you answer it?
Oh my God. Oh no. Oh no. Question I've always wanted to be asked. Oh man.
You don't have to.
Maybe.
Have
That's like the that's like the what would you say to your younger self question that I just I can't answer it, because it's like I don't know, you know. It's like I wouldn't know the answer to like what question do I wish I was asked in an interview until like someone asked it.
That's true. So, I find sometimes that in certain kinds of interviews, people tend to get asked the same kinds of questions over and over and over again, and sometimes it can get a little tiring. But I guess as we're wrapping up, what are your future goals for continuing into the future? What are you most proud of that you've done so far, and what should we be on the lookout for, and how can we support you?
I have to pause you because someone has the room that I'm rudely and too late. I'm so sorry. Can we pause and we'll
absolutely
finish right outside?
Yeah.
Okay. One sec.
So now that you're settled in your new spot, what are your future goals as an artist? What are you most proud of that you've done so far and heading into the future? And how can we most support you moving forward?
You know, I think that my future goals are just to keep making specific, honest to goodness musical theater. You know, I want to keep making shows that I believe in.
Yeah.
I haven't yet done like a sellout show, meaning like I haven't sold out. And I don't know if I will, but maybe I will. But my dream is to like keep finding stages for musicals that I write, that I care about, and that I stand behind. And I've been so lucky that, you know, whether it's like a show that I've done on Broadway or a show that I've done in a 50-seat basement theater somewhere in the middle of America, I really can stand behind everything I've written. And I'm really proud of it. And I'm really proud of the fact that my stuff has connected with actual human beings who, some of whom love theater, some of whom are introduced to theater through my stuff. And that's the thing that I just continually cannot get over, the fact that there are people out in the world who know my songs and who like them and who find any kind of inspiration in them. It just like blows my mind. And so everything, you know, sort of like what I said before, like everything that I do is in service of that. Like I just want to reach the largest number of human beings possible with this stuff that I believe in. And if I could do anything to make anyone, you know, whether it's like young people or, you know, people who might normally turn their noses up at musicals, into musicals, because I just think it's like, I think, you know, musical theater is the best thing going. Then I feel like I'm succeeding if I'm doing that.
And how can we follow you on social media?
You can follow me on all of the platforms, Mr. Joe Iconis, MrJoeiconis. I'm even on TikTok.
Nice.
Which is like the ultimate I guess that's like that's the new dad rock. Guys my age being on TikTok, but I am. So I'm trying to stay current and connect however I can. So yeah, so follow me and like listen to my stuff. And I don't know if I'm playing at a theater near you, please go see me.
Yeah.
And my gang.
Have you been doing any virtual things or virtual concerts during the pandemic?
You know, I've done a few. We're my friend George Salazar and I are going to do we have a 2-man cabaret called Two Player Game. We're going to do it at Feinstein's 54 Below here in the city in a couple weeks, and we're going to live stream it. And so if you do not happen to live in New York City and you still care about theater, you should totally buy that live stream and you can watch it. And it's our first like sort of proper live stream thing. And so that'll be cool. I haven't done a ton of it, just because I'm so like obsessed with being in the room, with other other humans. But now that we're like coming back to it, and now that we're able to like actually do live performances again, I find myself more excited about like live streaming and about like doing the stuff that people have been doing for the last 2 years.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for taking the time to be here. You're amazing. Everybody, if you don't know Joe's incredible work, please go out and get all of his albums and learn about it. And for those of you who do, keep supporting. And thank you. Please keep us posted on how you're doing and what's new. It's been delightful.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been great.